Hello there, welcome to this game review. So in this one, this was a 10 plus 5 game, and you mentioned it was with bad time management, but with such short time controls, it's very hard to actually manage your time correctly. And the best I can offer is to have slightly more time than the opponent, and think on a few occasions in the game. Otherwise, just do blunder checks and try not to give everything up. So the game started quite well. Black got this passive position, and this structure is always good for white with the d and e pawns exchanged, because now white has the plan of putting the knight on d5, and black will either have to weaken his position with c6. This would weaken the pawn, which is usually on d6, or black will have to take it, and usually we will take back of the c pawn to open up the c file, and we will attack the backwards pawn on c7. So black also doesn't really have many good squares for his pieces, and here white already has the bishop pair. His pieces are taking away squares from each other. So e3, this is a fine move, rook a d1. You do have slightly less time than the opponent, but the position is very good. Here b5 was played after a while. Objectively, we should be playing this very slowly and trying to play knight d5 at a good moment. Another plan for white is to expand in the center with f4 and e4. So one idea is to already go here. It does look a bit loose, but black cannot use this square because of checkmate. And next we can play e4, rook f2, e1. We have the bishop pair. The position is extremely good. So objectively, this is close to winning strategically. But b5 I don't really like, because after knight e5 we didn't really achieve much. We're not winning this pawn, and this pawn on c4 is now attacked. So now white will have to do something strange and dynamic to compensate, maybe c5. But after the queen moves away, the structure is now a bit loose. We don't really like changing the structure in this position. So b5 kind of gives up a new square. Wasn't necessary. Okay, in a rapid game we have the urge to do something, but in a classical game I believe you wouldn't play b5. Okay, knight e7 he goes, and you took a pawn, which is concrete enough. He plays c6, which is the best chance. Try to get this bishop out of the home next to the king. So now black kind of has the compensation in the form of a weakened king. There are a couple of pieces around it, but it shouldn't be anything special. Queen h3, f3. And he gives up the bishop pair, the last dark squared bishop. So now it's clear that white is positionally winning, as he has the bishop pair, the kind of better structure, and a pawn advantage as well. But as happens in winning positions, the first priority is to stop counterplay, because if we allow counterplay, then the opponent might randomize things and something bad might happen. So e4 is played. This move does make some sense. And probably the first priority should be either to get this bishop back into the game somehow, or get the queen out of h3. We can do this by, for example, maneuvering the bishop to c2. We could also just start striking in the center with c5. He cannot take because of tactics, and the bishop can come back this way. And if we get the bishop back into the game, then we will not have any bad pieces. The opponent doesn't really have real threats. After e4, he had a nice idea in h5, which makes sense because black's only possible play is on the king side. But okay, he plays h6, bishop b7, but the bishop is going to d5 to get taken, and I don't think we should give up the bishop pair that easily, because having just a pawn is not really the best white can do from this position. Okay, rook b8, the bishop goes here, g5 he plays, but g5 with the idea of g4 is not extremely effective. Queen c2, king g7, and I guess if g4, in the worst case we can take now here, because a rook will be opened up towards the pawn on f7. So this looks quite horrible for black. I guess he can play on like this and take this, but we're a pawn ahead and his king is actually weaker than ours. So this looks very good. Okay, king g7. And this should ring alarm bells. He just put his king in front of this strong dark squared bishop. So we should be thinking about how to exploit this. And after all, we do have the bishop pair. And if the opponent's last moves are g5, king g7. This means he's not really threatening anything, so maybe it's time for us to strike. And f4 doesn't require too much calculation. We're opening up this diagonal, opening up this rook. Looks horrible. Okay, now you took on e5. I guess this is kind of a panic to get rid of pieces to simplify the position. And sure, white does retain an advantage here, but it wasn't necessary to give up the bishop. Okay, now rook b1. I guess this is fine. Probably makes sense to just push your extra pawn, as this is white's only kind of advantage at this point. But okay, this happens. And g4, so of course, black will try to get some kind of counterplay. And now we played rook b7, which I guess is just a miscalculation, because, well, what is the opponent supposed to do, right? If he plays here, then sure, rook b7 works, because you made him go passive. But checks, captures, and attacks. And instead of defending from the threat, he can eliminate it with tempo by taking the bishop, and then f3 is actually hanging. So here, white is still winning, but we should take a bit of care over at the king side and not get too overzealous in the center and queen side. Just move the queen away, defend the pawn on f3. Let's recapture. Now the rook can go to the f file or here as well. We will get the queen out of h3, and the white always has a big advantage. Okay, after this, now you took back with the e-pawn to get two connected passed pawns, which makes sense positionally, but positional things are not the most important right now. The most important is to not get checkmated, right? Because after this, we still will have a pawn advantage, well, at least until he takes here. But importantly now, at least, he doesn't have the e-pawn. Right? But as happens in the game, now he not only is having a strong attack, but also two connected passed pawns. You have passed pawns as well, but at this point, 2 minutes against 4 minutes, it's very hard to analyze the thought process. But basically both sides have to push their passed pawns respectively, but black's passed pawns are more dangerous because they're closer to the king. So white should be extra careful. So e4, queen a2, he defends on f7, queen f2, and rook takes a7. But this is also not really a priority, so here we have a few choices of where to put the rook, right? And we must find the most effective place. Here you took the pawn, so we did win a pawn, but it should be clear that in such a position a pawn doesn't matter, because we already have two connected passed pawns, so taking this one, creating this passed pawn, will not change anything about the game. After all, this is not the one that we're trying to queen. Instead, we should be stopping the opponent's pawns, because ours are very strong. And we can play rook e7, take this one, then we will take these pawns. And again, when we have an advantage, our first priority should be to avoid counterplay. So rook e7 takes away the only chance for black. He can, I guess, defend it, but we can take it anyway. And we will have two connected passed pawns. Okay, rook a7. Now queen d4. This also kind of works. But now rook c7. But again, what's the point of rook c7? His queen is not really ideally placed here anyway. He is going to move it anyway. And here a blunder check would have helped before making any move. Imagine that you have made the move and think about the opponent's checks, captures, and attacks, and queen h3 is basically the only move because, well, he's not going to take here, right? This is an easy calculation. After queen h3, checkmate is threatened. So why did we make the opponent go here? It's unclear. Instead, again, just take this pawn maybe. No, I guess queen c5 is here. Queen d5, I guess, is the most accurate. And after rook f8, we can push the pawn. And now the queen is also blocked on this diagonal. Okay, rook c7, and here, after rook b8, I guess black is giving checkmate, as it's quite difficult to avoid. But okay, in time trouble, a lot of things happened. The rook b7 is apparently good. But okay, here, the queen went back and forth, the king g7, a4, but again, kind of the wrong priorities, right? This pawn is never going to become a queen. We should either try to queen these pawns or get rid of these. So I guess rook b7 is a possibility to go to b4 to take away the only open file from black. The problem with this is rook b8. Right. Okay, a4, king g6, queen a2. I mean, if you're going to push the pawn, you can just push it, right? Okay, queen a2, d7, and finally, after some chaos, here white times out. But here it was kind of a draw with forcing moves, and forcing moves are the first moves that should come to mind. Checks, 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 and here apparently white will give a perpetual, which is not hard to believe, as the king is quite open. So this is quite a chaotic game, and again, this was a very fast time control, so we can't really blame ourselves too much for time management. And I think the time management wasn't even that bad. The problem was more the chess part, and once you got a big advantage, you did not try to get rid of counterplay, and this queen stayed on h3 for the whole game, which I think shouldn't have been allowed. Something like queen, rook e1, maybe queen c2, queen g2 should have been considered. But okay, hope this was useful, and for the future I would suggest playing with longer time controls to show what you're really capable of. So, good luck.